Are you waking up tired or having trouble managing stress? Maybe getting sick more often than you should? Those three things may be tied together, and the reason might lie in the first 30 minutes of your day. It has to do with something called the Cortisol Awakening Response. And if this Cortisol Awakening Response is off, your whole day is off. Today, I want to show you why the Cortisol Awakening Response matters, how it gets messed up, and what you can do to reset it with free, simple habits that anyone can start. Now, cortisol is your body's main stress hormone, right? But it follows a daily rhythm. The Cortisol Awakening Response, or CAR, is a sharp surge in cortisol, about 50 to 150% increase in cortisol that happens in the first 30 to 45 minutes after you wake up. And this cortisol surge first thing in the morning, you can kind of think of it as like your body's main ignition switch. It's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis. Now, the way that works is your hypothalamus in your brain signals the pituitary, which then signals your adrenal glands. And then your adrenal glands secrete cortisol. And then the cortisol pulse powers your system up for the day. So what's the purpose of this cortisol awakening response? Why does it even happen? Well, there's really four main reasons. Number one is kind of fueling up, right? The cortisol awakening response mobilizes glucose to give your body a boost so that you don't start the day running on empty. Second is really brain efficiency. So research shows that people with a strong cortisol awakening response have less raw prefrontal activity in the brain, but stronger coordination with memory centers. Basically what that means is that the brain does more with less. So basically it's kind of more efficient. The third thing that the cortisol awakening response does is it's sort of an emotional reset. Cortisol reins in the stress centers of the brain so that you're not carrying yesterday's emotional baggage. And then the last thing, the fourth thing, is immune balance. And this may be one of the most important things. That morning cortisol pulse calms down overnight inflammation by reducing inflammatory chemicals like interleukin-6, TNF-alpha, and then it moves immune cells into the right places. If anybody's had a cortisone injection, that's a derivative of cortisol, right? It's an anti-inflammatory type of thing. So when your cortisol awakening response is healthy, you wake up feeling fueled and focused and emotionally reset and also protected with the immune system. Now there's a few reasons why the cortisol awakening response becomes dysregulated. Number one, and the most obvious, is chronic stress, right? At first, stress can actually exaggerate the cortisol awakening response, which is kind of a good thing. But over time, if chronic stress continues, the cortisol awakening response actually flattens. So some people call this adrenal fatigue, which technically isn't true. Your adrenals aren't like literally running out of juice, but it paints the right picture. Your stress system gets dysregulated and it gets burnt out. Now, another big reason that the cortisol awakening response gets dysregulated is just because of poor sleep. Short or fragmented sleep blunts the cortisol awakening response, which is why after a bad night, you don't just feel tired. Your stress system is kind of starting out on the wrong foot as well. Now, the third reason, there's a lot of reasons, but three that I'm listing right now, is shift work, right? So circadian disruption scrambles up the light cue that helps anchor the cortisol awakening response. Now, if you've been paying attention, and I know you have, you may realize that there's a bit of a vicious cycle here. More stress results in a blunted cortisol awakening response, right? And then a blunted cortisol awakening response results in less tolerance to stress and more inflammation. That then will result in more stress, and around we go. But here's the good news. You can strengthen your cortisol awakening response without fancy tests or expensive gadgets. The first thing you can do is morning light, right? If you wake up and you step outside and get some sunshine on your face within the first 30 minutes of awakening, that stimulates a part of the brain that will help with the cortisol awakening response. Now, if you're on shift work or it's wintertime and the sun doesn't rise until later, that's okay. You can get a bright light therapy box, and when used for 20 to 30 minutes within the first half hour after awakening, it can really help strengthen and re-regulate the cortisol awakening response. Now, for shift workers, that means using it at your subjective morning, which is when you normally wake up, right? Another way is a sunrise alarm clock. Now, these clocks slowly increase their brightness and color over a 15 to 20 minute period rather than a sharp beep like other alarm clocks. And by doing this, you expose this thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus of your brain to light, and then that naturally increases cortisol. And studies have shown that a sunrise alarm clock can help improve sleep quality and reduce perceived stress. Now, another thing you can do is to focus on sleep quality and consistency, which is kind of a duh statement, but when you have short or fragmented sleep, it blunts or distorts the cortisol awakening response. So try to prioritize about 7 to 9 hours of sleep, a consistent wake time, and reducing waking up in the middle of the night, which could mean less alcohol, limiting bright screens at night, avoiding or limiting stimulants, and maybe kicking your pet out of your room. Now, a third way that you can help increase your cortisol awakening response, or maybe re-regulate it, is through stress management and recovery, right? Chronic stress initially elevates the CAR, but over time, that overdrive flattens it. And so managing stress through practices like mindfulness or deep breathing and exercise can help re-regulate the cortisol awakening response and that HPA axis that we talked about. And if all else fails, look into a counselor, right? That's what they're there for. Now, the last way that I'll mention is through specific timing of physical activity. Moderate morning exercise can reinforce this cortisol awakening response and the rhythm of the cortisol release. But late night, high intensity activity can disrupt sleep and the CAR. So try light to moderate activity first thing in the morning, like a light jog or stretching or yoga. And then lastly, if you want more support, adaptogens like ashwagandha and rhodiola and ginseng, they can help smooth out that cortisol awakening response. So here's the takeaway. The cortisol awakening response is your body's daily stress test, right? If it's strong, you start the day energized, clear-headed, and resilient. But if it's weak, you start the day already behind. And that cycle of stress and inflammation will just go on and perpetuate. But the best part is you can reset it, right? With free, simple habits like light first thing in the morning, better sleep habits, movement first thing in the morning, stress recovery. And if you found this helpful, please like the video, subscribe, share it with someone that you know who isn't sleeping well. And if they're a shift worker, they should probably be watching it. Or if you're just feeling groggy and you have a hard time getting up in the morning. Take care.